Number one, and this is kind of what I said, but not really. You got to determine what is your podcast about and what is your content going to be? What is your genre? Are you going to have a co-host? Things like that. And it's kind of hypocritical for me to say because our podcast is basically just rambling.
Hmm.
We talk about whatever, but the dynamic is it's Spike and Mad, you know?
Yeah.
Like if you listen to Howard Stern, it's like, well, what is Howard Stern? What is his show really about? It's just him being crazy. And
Hmm.
our show is Spike and Mad talking about stuff that we find interesting and or funny, you
Yeah.
know?
I was gonna say like, okay, with the co-host thing, it's like I know people out there who have like big enough personalities where they can hold down a podcast by themselves. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
if you're not that way, I would recommend getting a co-host because I think me and Spike could easily hold the podcast ourselves. But we our idea came from we would like sit in the office together and just like ramble on about random things. So we said let's just start recording that kind of stuff. Um, but I think I think that's where I would start first. Is like, can I
Yes.
hold it myself? And if I can't hold it myself, try to find a friend. But and then when it comes to like finding a friend, you need to find someone that's gonna like be about it. You know what I mean? You can't have like that one friend that's like, oh yeah, I'll record on Monday, and then you call him on Monday, he's like hungover. You know?
Or they ghost,
Yeah.
You got to have
They
somebody
don't.
that's accountable and
Mm-hmm.
is going to be professional.
So you just gotta make sure you find someone that like also finds this kind of interesting.
Well, there's great podcasts with one person. I mean, the Bill Burr Monday Morning Podcast is
Hmm.
awesome. Chris D'Elia's podcast is great. It's just kind of parroting what you said. If you can hold it down yourself, that's fantastic. Um, and make sure you've got enough of like a good enough dynamic or a good enough topic that you can give good content. Like if you've got something that should be a 10-minute podcast, don't record for an hour.
Yeah.
So I've heard of there's podcasts about literally anything you can imagine, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I've seen some that are like so ridiculously specific that there's so little content. Like you could cover the entire topic in one episode, you know.
Yeah.
So then what are you talking about for 40 episodes? So make sure that your genre or whatever you're doing is something that you can continue to do. Like a lot of talk shows that have become very, very popular over the past few years, well, even maybe decades, all the way back to like Rush Limbaugh, is political commentary because it's always fresh content. You know, people can
Hmm.
always talk about what's happening in Washington, blah, blah, blah. Sports is always fresh content. You can always talk about new stuff. And that's what I like about us is we aren't specific to anything. Like we've talked about boxing, we've talked about YouTube, we've talked about gaming, we've talked about all these different things. We're not pigeonholing ourselves into one very specific niche, you know? So a lot of
Yeah.
people on YouTube, if you type in like how to start a podcast or how to make your podcast grow, which we have done because we're trying to do that, every fucking video is like find your niche, be very, very specific. And I'm like, I mean, I get that, but if everyone is trying to find their niche, then there's no outliers. Maybe you need to
Yeah.
be an outlier. Maybe you need to be like H3H3 or Logan Paul or Joe Rogan and talk to everyone about everything, you know?
Yeah. Like when you look up how to make a podcast on YouTube, what they think and what they make videos about is how to be successful on a podcast. You know what I mean? They kind of want you to do what like they've seen other successful people do before, where we're more teaching you like just literally how to make a podcast. You know what I mean? How to get it up and running.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
as opposed to like how to get like views. You know what I mean? Like that stuff comes later. Like they treat that as step one when step one should really be like what equipment to use and like what like kind of software to use.
Well, I agree with you in that you should know like this is the nuts and bolts of getting it on, the logistics of it, but you should also have a rough concept. You shouldn't just go into it and be like, "All right, now what's our podcast about?" Like
Hmm.
you should already know that going into episode 1, you know.
Yeah.
A mistake that I think we made was we kind of launched too early in that we recorded episode 1, posted episode 1, you
Yeah.
know. I feel like you should have 3 to 5 episodes banked and when you launch, you should launch all 3 to 5 at once so that people can watch 4 or 5 episodes in a row if they want to, you know?
Yeah. We have this as a topic at the end, but one thing that I was seeing people say as well is a lot of people who, because I follow like the podcast subreddit, and they said what they did was they, before they made a podcast, they made a social media. So they made like a YouTube, they made like a Twitter and an Instagram, and they would like put their logo up, and they would say like they would make a countdown pretty much, you know what I mean, like 1 day to go, you know what I mean, and like, oh, like an hour to go, and they would like release a trailer on YouTube, so they kind of build up hype for it, you know what I mean, and
I
then
get that. Yeah.
they follow other people that follow podcasts already, and then they get the attention of other people, you know what I mean, because they don't have an episode out yet, but people are gonna be like, oh, like what are they gonna be about? So then
I
when they actually do officially launch, like they'll get a lot of views.
I like that, and I like that on paper, but
Yeah,
what bothers me about that is when they're like, click here to go to our website or whatever, and you click and then it just says coming soon. I'm like, well, what
yeah.
the fuck? Where is it? You know?
Hmm.
So I would rather, like, you could do both of what we just said. Like, you could have 5 episodes banked and you could build the hype so that when you launch, boom, there's 5 episodes. But don't launch and then have limited content. Like, you want your people, especially if they're paying, like, you want your people to be able to consume content immediately.